Sport Business. Global Sports Intelligence.
Hello, greetings from the Sport Business Podcast, brought to you this week from Paris. I am Martin Ross, Editor-in-Chief of Sport Business News. We're coming to you from the inaugural SportGen Summit here at the Pavillon Gabriel, which is just a stone's throw away from Élysée Palace and the Champs-Élysées. I'm here with Maria Koledova, Senior Reporter at Sport Business Media. We'll be joined later by Matthew Glendinning, European Editor at Sport Business Sponsorship. This week we're going to bring you some top newsroom items. We're going to give you a flavour of the conference here in Paris. And there'll be the usual any other business. Maria's going to bring you up to date from what happened to the EuroLeague. And yeah, a bit different this week, but Maria, bienvenue à Paris.
Merci.
How are you doing?
I'm good. It's boiling, sweltering here, I think in London too, so.
Are you enjoying everybody's first taste of SportGen? What's it like? What's the vibe like? What are the people like? What's the content like?
The vibe is good, the space is fantastic, there's a lot of people here, a lot of different kinds of mix of industry folk, a lot of brands for sponsorship, some commercial rights holders, a lot of kind of investments, capital people, pretty wide mix, but it seems to be good, very kind of European focused, not a ton of people from overseas, kind of outside of mainland Europe.
Yeah, obviously it's twinned with Roland Garros taking place at the same time, so there's some big hitters in town. Mark Lashley was here, Avenue Capital Group. Romy Guy is speaking later, FIFA. Jérôme Parmentier, IOC. We have Brett Gosper from the NFL and multiple others, but everybody wants to know at a conference, what's the content like, who's there, and what's the food like? And the drink. Let's say we're well hydrated. Maria, tell us a bit about the food, give us a bit of flavour. I know that you're maybe not able to enjoy all of it, but...
I fear the food is a little bit style over substance. It is good. There is not very much of it. It's very French, kind of fancy, Michelin star-esque picky bits. A lot of kind of various jellied things. And
it's very amuse-bouche.
Yes, that's correct.
A petit four. If you want a good square meal, maybe, but it's 35 degrees, so nobody wants a good square meal.
Yes, we had big dinners.
Did you get, we have Emmanuel Macron around the corner, and we were served with macaron, which is a very terrible French pun, but that's the best I've got for you. But yes, news.
So we've been in Paris, and unfortunately for us, a lot of us are traveling. The news does not stop. So what have you been following this week? What's been up?
Yeah, ourselves and our colleagues back in London. We've got John and Joe heading off to Budapest. There's been a couple of big items. One on Gucci's Alpine F1 deal was finally confirmed. Quite a significant step, actually, that a luxury fashion house is serving as a title sponsor of an F1 team, obviously on the back of LVMH association, everything that's happened there in F1. It is a hot space for those kind of brands, but I'm not going to dwell on that because I know you want to go into media depth, which would be the one we reported exclusively, actually, yesterday, that. And I can't remember a tender taking place with such a short time frame. It's 13 days you have to bid for Champions League rights, Europa Conference League rights for Spanish language in the US. Now, just to remind any listeners that don't know, obviously Relevant football partners are selling on behalf of UC3, a joint effort. Relevant had the rights in the last cycle in the US for English language, for which they did a deal. They had the rights in the last cycle and in the US in its entirety, actually, but did a longer English language deal. So now we have, if you want to get a bid in, you've only got until June the 8th, I think, so better make it snappy. But you wonder maybe what's going on in terms of interest they've had, because it's such a hot ticket item with Television Univision, with DAZN, with everything, in the US. It's a big ticket item, and then for such a short time frame, I think is unusual. I don't know, have you ever seen a tender that short?
I don't think I have. Obviously, they're coming off a really busy time in Europe. They've just gone to market and, they did the big 5 and then now over, I think, around 20 in Europe, done quite well. We've heard that they're getting some big increases. So, they've got momentum, but also those rights, those Spanish language rights in the US are really, really valuable. There's, a lot of viewership there in that demographic. So those will be really important for them as well.
Yeah, one to watch out for next month. There's some sponsorship deals brewing, which we will bring to you soon, but we haven't quite got them over the line yet, maybe in terms of our reporting, but there's a couple coming there as well. The other big one on the media side was Imran Yusuf, our editor-in-chief, who reported on the FIFA Z deal being done effectively, which has been a tough process for for FIFA in India and the wider subcontinent, depreciation of the rupee, the merger between Disney Star and Reliance, the advertising market after the ban on betting companies. There's been a whole bunch of, I suppose, even just the macroeconomics going on clearly at the moment in the world with the conflict in the Middle East. So India right now, which the IOC is trying to get a deal over the line with, including cricket at the Olympics for the first time, is a tough market. But they've managed to get their deal ahead of the World Cup. And an interesting move that Z would come back after all this time. Dare say there will be a deep dive on that in Sport Business Media, perhaps even by Imran. So you want the number on that, then keep a lookout in the coming weeks. But yeah, maybe staying on broadcast, just from here, a couple of takeaways. We were both actually at the broadcast panel this morning, which was Laurent Lelay, head of sports at France Télévisions, Jérôme Parmentier, head of media rights sales at the IOC, and Sunil Patel, CEO of Whisper. There was a couple of interesting sound bites there. They were cautious, but there was a couple of interesting sound bites. Marie-Laurent Lelay said something that you'd expect somebody senior at a public broadcaster to say, but what was the messaging he was trying to get out here? Obviously, France Télévisions, a broadcaster of Roland Garros, but going through a huge process right now. I've never known them to be cutting so much on Six Nations, but also on, we don't know what's going to happen with Coupe de France. They severe budget cuts at the moment, but so he was really banging the drum for free-to-air, as maybe you'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, he said something really interesting, which was that content has no value if people can't find it, and that being visible is part of the product, which, I think kind of also comes into the whole fragmentation of media rights. There's streaming, there's OTT, there's linear, there's pay TV, and I think it's becoming harder and harder to actually find the specific match you want to watch. Let's say even at the Roland Garros, if you want to watch the night session, you need Amazon. Yeah. And so I think it was all just kind of part of that broader conversation. Yeah,
I mean, interesting to say, the value for him is the fact that they are out there. There was a cheeky bit at the end, actually, when he said that the deal's being done with influencers and social media networks, which are being done purely on an ad revenue share basis. He said that we don't think that's the future. But then he did actually go on, I think, to say that he's open to doing that, as you would, because then you're not paying a rights fee. Yeah. But he doesn't believe that to be the stable model. Obviously, we've seen more and more of that everywhere. In France a bit with Zach Nani and others. From the IOC point of view, they were really talking about leaning on content creation, that kind of triangle they talked about between the influencer, or in this case, the kind of famous name, and Snoop Dogg, the ambassador, with also the broadcaster and the IOC. And how they kind of manage that productivity there is between what the broadcaster wants and having, enabling the ambassador and the influencer to create as much content as they can so they don't rival the broadcaster. And NBC was always so protective over,
the IP.
The IP, exactly. But now we're opening up to platforms, but only if they bring traffic to NBC and make a bigger return, boost the avalanche rev share and all. So, yeah, there was bits and bobs. They were cautious, but we did have someone else on the panel who I went a bit deeper with. Who was that?
Yes, you did. I believe that was Sunil.
Yeah, Sunil at Whisper. It was an interesting time to speak to Whisper and Sunil Patel, CEO. They are host broadcaster here at Roland Garros. Second year, correct. Taken over from HBS, but they've just been through a process of seeking investment, seeking a buyer really. A process that they ended up actually retaining full private ownership. And that was the kind of messaging around it, but I wanted to dig a bit deeper with him, and he did really kind of open up a bit on, this is a company that was formed in 2010 as a privately held company, then the Channel 4's kind of private indie fund came in and invested, Sony then came in and bought their share, and Sony have now sold up, and they're back to kind of that full private ownership, and the messaging around the time was we've got our own independence and so on, but you don't go through a year-long process that he said they had 16 first-round bidders after cutting some off. One of the big ones was Redbird and IMI, which is a kind of UAE media company, who got quite close to the shortlist, and then they went into exclusive talks with a private equity firm. But interestingly, and when I interviewed him, he said that he wanted to retain the full independence of Whisper, and that this private equity firm kind of wanted to reskin the deal, wanted to load more debt onto the company. He wasn't ready to do that. But you imagine the shareholders wanted an exit, and they were up for it because it was going to be a big, handsome return for them. But he said they decided to pull the plug. He said it was the best thing that they could have done. He said you've got to make hard decisions. So it leaves them in a place where they've secured some external investment through Barclays, who have basically bought back the capital from Sony, and they have additional capital there, and will now go out for a new sort of equity partner on their terms. But unusual to go through a sale process. I suppose we've seen Infront go through a sales process and there's been no answer. But he was also quite candid on Sony, saying in terms of, did they totally transform the business? He asked himself. And he said, well, no, they didn't, which is quite unusual for somebody to be that candid. He said it was a badge and a brand association. He wants now somebody to come in deeper, somebody to inject capital, somebody they can learn from the business. I've never interviewed him before, but the kind of guy who wants to be challenged all the time. He said he wants to make difficult decisions, he wants them to prove themselves again. And that's where they kind of differentiate themselves.
I also believe you met a fellow countryman, somebody else at Whisper this week.
Correct, yes. So there will be a video coming on this. There will also be a long read on the Sunil Patel interview either today or on Monday. So if you want a longer read on remote production, what they're doing in different sports, how they've hired from different sectors, big tech, Google, YouTube, had a bunch of people either challenging themselves. But yes, I did. I interviewed Formula One star. Do you want to have a guess who it was? Well, you kind of know who it was, but pretend you don't know.
If I had to pretend I didn't know, I would say Lewis Hamilton.
No, more Scottish than that. David Coulthard, a kind of childhood hero actually, and he was good value. So David, the link here is David was a co-founder of Whisper, had a stake, and still has a stake. He was speaking on stage here yesterday about why he's investing in sport. So we had a good chat with him. Oh, I actually asked him about Queen of the South. He's from Dumfries.
Yeah, you covered some football there.
And Queen of the South is... any knowledge about Queen of the South?
You've done all of this with me already, so I have all the fun facts about the Bible. I believe it is the only football team to be named in the Bible as a subject.
Yeah, well, Corinthians is kind of a given from Brazil, but there's lots of, there's like Spurs is in there as a verb, or Arsenal, but they're not the actual word. But yeah, Queen of the South, which was another name for the Queen of Sheba, who gets our first mention on the Sport Business Podcast.
The last as well.
He was chatting about Queen of the South a bit and his son sports Kilmarnock, but not that many people care about that. More importantly, he was talking about how he sees Whisper as a company, and he really kept going on about this team element, a team player, and how much that meant to him. Even so much that in BBC, when he did his first ever commentary, he said, we'll have a one-on-one review. He's like, no, let's bring it around as a team and I'll do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to play you out from the first segment with the dulcet tones of DC. How was his accent?
Fantastic.
He's good. He's got a strong accent.
Yeah, very good.
We're going to play you out with that, and he's talking about just what sports means as a live product, why sport matters, and then also how he wants, and Sunil was quite big on this actually, Whisper to act as a team and have that kind of whole ethic running through the business. So from one Scotsman to another, I'll hand you over to David, who's going to chat to you for a minute and a half, and we'll be back after the break with Matthew Glendinning, who's going to go big on some of the sponsorship themes we've had here.
Even if you're not a sports, you wouldn't say you're a sports fan today, you don't have a team. You can't help but be brought into large sporting events as an event that brings people together and is used for positive change and good. I was at the Laureate Sports Awards Foundation event in Monaco, and Nelson Mandela was still with us, and okay, he's just one man and he may be divisive to some, but he stood up and spoke about how sport has an ability to change the world, to bring people together in a way that politicians can't, and all that sort of good stuff where you're hearing it and you go, God, that's why I love this actually. He was articulating something that's in people who are sports fans that maybe you don't always understand why, because it comes from such a young age. But yeah, I believe that Whisper will always use its love of sport, its reactive creativity to live sport event to be a catalyst for how we operate in other areas. Because as I said on stage, I truly believe that we aspire to operate like a sports team, which is you're getting your annual results every weekend. Every week you've got to be delivering, which I know a lot of people in business, have that mentality, but actually a lot of bigger businesses don't. It's about, quarterly results and things like that. And you've got to be improving every single day in sport, otherwise you're going backwards.
From private equity to global media and US college sports, unlock the most trusted data and insights in our reports. Explore more at sportbusiness.com.
Joined here by Matthew, who's been checking out all the sponsorship panels and scouring for information, as usual, over the last couple of days. Matthew, what's your feeling about the vibe of the conference? How are you enjoying it? What's it like?
Well, there's not much not to like about where we are.
True.
We're not just under a parasol
It's very leafy.
In someone's back garden. There's a beautiful pavilion, very air conditioned, very well organised. I think personally that France needs a conference like this, and this looks like could be the one.
And you were moderating a panel yesterday with Richard Heselgrave, Chief Revenue Officer at PSG. Who was he joined by, and what were the big takeaways? It's very difficult when you do a panel, isn't it, to try and put your mind around what's happened in the panel, because you're so focused kind of question to question, but as you kind of reflect back on the panel, what do you think were the takeaways?
Well, reflecting back on a panel, you'd hope there'd be some things you'd remember, otherwise, what was the panel? But joining Richard was Raquel Brown, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at League One Volleyball, which is known as Love. So when I say Love, I'm not making any particular,
feel free.
Particular messages to you. And Charlie Dewhurst, the Chief Commercial Officer at
SailGP. Yeah.
And they were a very interesting trio because the subject was lessons on sponsorship and brand evolution across the maturity curve. And maturity curve relates to how old the properties are. So PSG was founded in 1970, SailGP was launched I think in 2019.
Just pre-COVID,
Yeah, and Love was founded about 5 years ago, but didn't launch its sort of women's professional volleyball league in America until 2025. So they've got their different stages in their development. And I think what struck me was how not just evolution but innovation was key to their forward momentum. And obviously there are big differences in that SailGP's compound annual growth rate for its overall revenue was at over 50%, whereas...
Is that across all sectors of everything?
That's across all sectors,
okay.
Not just sponsorship. So not just sponsorship, but since its inception, it's grown at that rate. PSG has grown, but obviously you can't expect a mature property to grow at that sense. But they still have very high, Richard was telling me, it's very impressed upon him by the powers above him, that they really do expect growth. But what's interesting about, when I say innovation, the growth comes, with PSG at least, comes from directions that other clubs do not try, or could try.
I mean, the fashion play was a big move. They were an early mover in that sort of licensing, merchandising space, and Air Jordan.
And as much as but as much as that, the kind of Paris remains sort of embedded in the brand. I mean, we've talked about that a lot, but what I found really interesting was that he told me that PSG will no longer go on annual tours to kind of take the brand into new markets. It will go every 4 years, which is very unusual for a top club. I mean, every club now goes to the US or China or whatever. And he says, but they'll still go on tour, but it will just be PSG going on tour. So it's PSG and some culinary collaborator, or PSG and some fashion collaborator, and the merchandise will go on tour. So the players won't go on tour and they'll be refreshed, and he thinks that will work. And what even more interesting, I thought, or as interesting rather, was that you can imagine the sort of markets PSG will be going into, Asia and USA. He's targeting the UK market, and that's very unusual for a European football team to target another market in the top 5 league, because I don't know if it's a gentleman's agreement or what, but you don't do it. You don't see Manchester United setting up shop. I might have to fact check that in a European capital.
No.
PSG have done that on Oxford Street, but he's absolutely. He also said that Brits come to Paris more than, I think, after Americans. I think we're the next biggest sort of.
But that's the market I suppose he knows so well through his time at EFL. He was at World Rugby as well. But he will know the UK football scene so well. But was he confident ahead of the big game?
He wouldn't mention the big game.
Oh, wow, okay.
In fact, I don't think it's superstition. I don't think PSG want to appear like a club that take it for granted they're going to win it.
Yeah.
But so he was quite tentative about that, shall we say?
Yeah. I'm just going to slightly segue by telling a Paris tale. I went to a PSG game here in 2002. My team played PSG. Rangers played PSG in the UEFA Cup when I was studying here, and it went to penalties. And we actually, because it was a late kick-off, extra time, penalties, 0-0, 2 legs, 0-0. This is a good team. This was Anelka, Ronaldinho, Okocha, Arteta, Heinze. Great team, bad manager. Rangers won on penalties, but we actually couldn't get a taxi, and we walked all the way from the stadium at Parc des Princes to here at the Champs-Élysées. There used to be a pizza joint just up the road, which was open all night, and my dad and I had the best pizza in the world at 3 a.m. Now this was a very different PSG back then. They just, I think, opened the big superstar in Champs-Élysées. The very formative days of what they've become, and certainly in a football sense, just a complete mess compared to what they are now. So they've come a long way. Matthew, your thoughts on PSG then? 2002, PSG now, 2026.
Well, you say they're a bit of a mess in 2002. I remember I really liked the PSG brand even then, and it's probably the sort of the origin. It's not difficult to like the PSG brand because it's associated with Paris, and was at that time the only club associated with Paris. And you mentioned that superstore on the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah.
I went into that superstore, I can't remember, I think before 2002, and bought a PSG football shorts. Wore them for probably 20 years. You know, they were my sort of go-to football shorts. So no, PSG brand, yes, obviously they think of new ideas and they're very innovative and they're very into their collaborations. But they've always been a strong brand, even when they're a bit of a kind of flaky brand, if you get what I mean.
And we tried this at the beginning of the pod, but Gucci, F1, Alpine. This is quite a big thing, isn't it, for F1 and that fashion sector, which is increasingly becoming attracted by F1. What have you been hearing from people here about?
That was Rich this morning on the second day. I was just queuing up for a coffee, and there was a chat with Alpine. I said, could I have a chat? And he agreed to have a chat, and it was a very interesting chat. And
was this on record chat or off record?
It was a background chat.
Background chat. Okay. Well, maybe let's not name him.
Well, I won't name him. And B, he didn't. I'm not going to give any of the. He didn't give anything too much away. Let's put it that way. But he did say that one of the great things about the Gucci deal, apart from it's Gucci and it's going to be a big deal, is that having Gucci on the livery will encourage all kinds of other sponsors to come in behind them. A lot more B2C companies will come in. And he also said, quite frankly, the reason they wanted, this is a kind of scoop, the reason they announced now, or just a day or two ago, why would they do it now in the middle of Roland Garros or whatever, was because they'd learned from the experience of Adidas, who'd made, when they made their deal with Mercedes, that got leaked out on
Built, I think, was it?
Built and on the internet. It was basically as they were making the driver uniforms, the people in the factory were showing the designs, and so the whole thing was there was no coordination in the campaign. So they thought, well, we can't allow that, and so that's why they've gone early. And they're going to kind of let the world guess what that livery is going to look like. And he suggested a lot of kind of people will connect with AI to kind of concoct what that might look like using the Gucci livery and various other elements. And they'll keep that as a teaser. They're going to guard that secretly. So if that gets out, some terrible security failure will take place. And I'm not responsible for it.
And just maybe as a final point on, this goes deeper than sponsorship actually. One of the first panel sessions, I think it actually opened up the conference along with BNP Paribas, who were talking about the sponsor here, but was around, I suppose, major events and the Winter Olympics, which are coming to French Alps in 2030. One that you attended.
Yeah.
What feel did you get for the messaging there?
It's quite interesting. It was the first big panel of the conference, and it had the president of the
CNOSF.
French, yes, indeed, French, and I've written down her name. And I'm going to pronounce it right in a minute. So can we?
Is this a challenge?
Drum roll, Amélie Udea Castera, and she was up, and then she was up with the president of the domestic Winter Olympic program, and two things struck me.
Edgar Grospiron, I believe.
Really?
Yes.
And two things struck me. One is I was amazed to hear that. She was describing France as not a very confident nation at the moment.
Sporting-wise, or politically.
So we're not a confident nation. So that's really interesting to hear. But then she said how important sport was, as she might, and then she kind of made this point, which I thought was a really well-made point, that she thinks, although France has been a country of great sports people, men and women, it's not been a serious sporting country, and she thinks post Paris 2024 and then with the Winter Olympics, this will kind of consolidate the sort of the seriousness of sport, and I guess the sports industry in France, and which should be competing with the UK sports industry to some extent. And I think segueing into this conference, this is also, I would suggest, a result really of Paris 2024. It seems perfectly appropriate they should have this conference, and I think when I look at the names on the lanyards of people walking around, some are here for Roland Garros, by the way, we should remember that. It seems a very good quality of delegates.
Excellent. And before we move on,
oh yes,
I believe you have a quiz question.
Yes, I do, because one of the joys of going to somewhere else of your usual sort of path is you kind of overhear things, and certainly this is something I've never overheard in Chancery Lane, London, which is where our base is. So I just overheard one of the interns say, Montenegro has the most boring capital in the world. And actually, what is the name of Montenegro?
Podgorica.
Podgorica, correct.
Yeah.
Very good. But then I should put a condition on that he then said the beaches there are absolutely beautiful. You can't wait to go out to Montenegro. Not in the capital, by the way. The beaches of
I had a great
Montenegro.
holiday in Montenegro. Brilliant. Loved it.
Did you go to Podgorica?
We didn't go to Podgorica.
No.
We were on the coast. We were near Budva, and we went up the coast. And it was at a spell about 10 years ago. They had not cracked hospitality at all. It was very raw, but it was glorious. Yeah, would recommend.
Okay. And I also learned a little sort of proverb. These were young people sharing their sort of early business chops, and one said, 95% of anything is a grind. The rest is a personal journey. I thought, I like that.
That's a tattoo.
You can leave that out or keep that in.
No, I like it. Let's leave it in. That's a tattoo.
Okay.
We'll be tattooed with that coming back next week. Matthew, thank you for joining us. We'll have you on again soon, I'm sure. Safe trip back home on the Eurostar, and we'll be back very shortly with a look back instead of a look ahead this week, and any other business when Maria rejoins us. Back in a minute.
Stay ahead in the business of sport with trusted news, data and analysis across media rights, sponsorship and more. Explore our subscription options at sportbusiness.com.
Maria has rejoined us. Substitution, Glendinning off, Koladova on. We are going to do the fun bit, which we're actually going to look back instead of looking ahead this week. And we're going to magically teleport you to Athens.
Thank you so much. It's very kind
Maria,
of you.
maybe I'll give us the intro, what it maybe is to the very short intro, and I'll let you lead into the clip. But you were there for EuroLeague Final Four.
Yeah, so I before coming to Paris, I spent a few days in Athens for the EuroLeague Final Four. I talk about this in the clip, but it was crazy. I've never been at a sporting event like that. And then I'll talk about this later, but spent a few days just talking to people in the basketball world about everything that's going on.
Excellent. Well, let's hear. We go from Maria this week to Maria last week, which you might be listening to Maria next week. So let's have a listen.
Hi guys, coming to you from Athens. I'm here in Greece for the EuroLeague Final Four. The final matchup between Olympiacos and Real Madrid is just a couple hours away here, and already the energy in the city has been incredible. I was here for the semi-final games on Friday, and I can very genuinely say that I've never experienced anything like it. I mean, the energy in the stadium was just incredible. There were so many fans. There was so much passion. It was so loud and energetic. And I will say it's not a great place to be 5-2, but I made it work, and I really enjoyed watching basketball. So really looking forward to the final tonight here. And I mean, of course, I've spent the last few days talking to basketball stakeholders, talking to people from the league, talking to people in the industry, about everything that's going on in the sport. And I think it's kind of impossible here to go through any conversation without mentioning the NBA and its European plans. It does seem like there are conversations ongoing. There are a few NBA executives here in Athens for the Final Four. I don't think there's been anything formal, no formal conversations between EuroLeague and the NBA. At this point, there's just, I think, a lot more questions than answers about what might happen between the two leagues, if there's any plans for a deal, what any deal might look like. New EuroLeague CEO Tris Bueno had about an hour and a half with the media the other day, and also emphasized that they're exploring any and all sorts of arrangements for what a deal might look like, and they're just not really sure at this point in time. I also think it's a bit of a waiting game just to kind of see what ends up happening, but definitely want to keep an eye on. It's very, very interesting. And I think the NBA's European plans have also sort of sparked conversations about
how much interest there is in Europe for basketball. And I think that spurred EuroLeague's own commercial plans sort of for the near future, for the far future. As we know, they're talking about moving their clubs to a franchise model as opposed to a license model as it has been. And, there's been emphasis that there's a lot of interest on that front. I believe that there were 17 offers of franchise next year. That's, I think, 14 clubs and 3 investors. So, there's for sure interest on that front. I think it's, again, a matter of ironing out those plans and figuring out exactly what that might look like. I think it's also a conversation about long-term stability and trying to secure and diversify revenue sources for EuroLeague. There was mention of a new direct-to-consumer platform that I believe is going to be launched at some point next year that will encompass OTT streaming and, statistics and fantasy and merchandise and ticketing and sort of organizing all of that in one place for fans and also, as another source of revenue. And as we've reported on Sport Business Sponsorship, there's been a change in the way that EuroLeague basketball organizes its partnership and a shift away from the naming rights partner structure. And I think that's just one of those changes that are happening commercially for the organization. And from my discussions, it really seems as though EuroLeague basketball is looking to be very flexible in the way that it's looking at the future, really looking to solidify that long-term stability in the wake, I suppose, in the wake of what's going on with NBA and its plans for expansion in Europe. But that's all from me. I'm heading off to Paris tomorrow for the SportGen conference, so I will catch you next week in Paris. Bye.
Maria, a couple of follow-ups on that. First of all, what was the kind of venue? I was there 10 years ago, and that, the Athens Olympic Park, which is famously one of these kind of poor legacy stories of an Olympic park which hadn't been sort of touched, but I think they've tried to upgrade the basketball venue and the kind of surrounding area. How's it looking now?
The venue, I will say, is really cool, and
Okay.
they did a whole, just before the final, they did a whole kind of introductory, I don't even know how to describe a DJ set, perhaps, and there was like dancers and fireworks, and it was a whole thing, and they had all these screens and all this like artwork and stuff, which was really cool. The park itself, I will say, it's kind of like, you have to walk really far. When I went for the final, we actually had a little cart that took us from where the bus to the venue. It's just it's very far to get from the entrance into the general park, which is where they check the tickets, all the way to the arena. But the stadium, it did look really good.
Have they found lawnmowers in 10 years? Have they mown stuff? And it was not in good shape when I was there.
A lot of it was concrete.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of it was sand.
Yeah.
And it was very windy.
Yeah.
So everyone was kind of trying to get sand out of their eyes. But that's no one's fault except for Mother Nature.
And as you said in the clip, there's so many questions, I suppose, over what happens next. And one at a very basic level, I suppose, which cities, do they choose on the NBA Europe side? And there's been such a focus on big European football cities, and the part of that was reflected, I suppose, with Real Madrid being there in the Final Four. But then you also have, who was it, Fenerbahce, Panathinaikos?
It was Fenerbahce.
Olympiacos.
Yeah.
Olympiacos. So you then see the importance of the Greek market and the importance of the Balkan market. I suppose the question is, how much are all these important basketball markets going to get included in this, or will some of them get lost as they kind of really just focus on big financial, big European capitals? To me, that's quite one of the big ones.
Yeah, I think it's also, I will emphasize that no one really knows yet, but kind of from what's been reported, what's been out there, what we've written about, and what I've been talking to people about over the last few days, it does seem like they're going more for the kind of big Western Europe, big sports / sponsorship / media / general markets where there's a lot of money. And I think that's also part of the conversation where some people might think that the NBA doesn't quite understand the dynamics of a European market and how different each individual market is. So like basketball is, as you said, massive in the Balkans. It's a good source of revenue for them. It's massively popular. It's not the same at all as a France or as a Germany or as a UK, which are not as big in terms of basketball market. And then you obviously have Spain. And I think it's not a monolith.
Yeah.
Of course it's not. And that is a challenge. If the NBA were to do something in Europe, I think it would be a challenge for them. And I don't think they're quite considering those quote-unquote smaller markets. They're not really considering them maybe in the same way. And that was also a big part of the discussion. And you mentioned Real Madrid as well.
Yeah.
I believe they're the only, as of a few days ago, they were the only team to have not yet signed a renewed license agreement with EuroLeague. I believe that deadline is the end of June. Everyone else has signed, because there was talk before. I think Fenerbahce hadn't signed yet, Barcelona hadn't signed yet, but now it's just Real Madrid.
And a follow-up, how was the food? Or the food that you could look at?
The food that I could look at and smell was fantastic. I couldn't eat any of it because I have allergies, but it smelled fantastic, I will say.
As good as Paris? Bit meatier.
It was more complete meals as opposed to kind of deconstructed something or others. There was a lot of like wraps and salads and sandwiches, and it was very, it was, by the way, cleaned out. Everyone ate literally everything. It was really.
And my other question is, would you like to guess where I'm going to look back to as well? One of my pet subjects that I like to speak about now and again, given the my enhanced nature.
Ooh. Ooh. I couldn't possibly guess where you're going with that.
That wasn't meant to be that, but anyway. Enhanced games. Did you watch?
I personally did not, but you were messaging me about it. I landed, I turned on my phone, and you messaged me saying, "Oh, I'm watching the enhanced games." I was like, "Oh, okay."
Well, I didn't watch it live, so given it was in Vegas, I did actually wake up on the Saturday morning, took my dog out for a walk, came back, had a coffee, or tea actually, and watched about the 8 hours I kind of compressed into a couple of hours on the YouTube and forwarded.
Did Sandy like it?
Not a fan. She's not into enhancements, but there was a few things. There was an opening press conference where the founder said, "We are not an entertainment product, we are a scientific product," which I thought was really apt and fits in with what they're trying to do. They're trying to sell, products they're using this as a showcase to sell products to people. How well that's doing, we'll maybe come back to, I suppose, about the share price. But what was the vibe? The vibe was, it felt like the first time I watched Live. It was, it's a US production and stuff. They were so pumped to be talking about it. It was the best thing. They kept telling you how good it is. And I don't know whether this is just coming from a cynical Scottish point of view. You keep telling me how good something is, I'm not going to like it. So, there's a huge pressure on world records. They got a world record in the last event, Christian Golomev, who got their $1 million. The whole place then went great. There was these red lights that came on and the whole place started partying. Any commentary was, I don't know, have you seen any clips?
No, but you've told me.
I've bored you.
No, never.
Any commentary was all about, is he going to get a world record? Or is she going to do this? Has she got a world record? None of it was about, this is a really close race or anything. And the tweet that went out about Fred Curley, who won the 100 meters.
Oh, yes, I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, well, the time?
I don't know about the time, but I did see online that the person who won the 100 meters would have come last in the Paris Olympics.
Correct. Yeah, and would have not won the 1968 100 meter final at Mexico City. No. 9.97. But the tweet that went out was that it said world's fastest man, well, on that day.
Sure.
Fred Curley almost breaks the world record, it said, and they got so much heat for this. It's like me saying I almost broke 70 when I played at St Andrews.
Yeah, I'm sure I've almost broken the world record at something or other several times in my life.
Yeah, so the share price has bottomed out actually. So they went public, the blank check firm called a Paradise Acquisition Corp. The valuation at the time, 1.2 billion, a lot of press about it, but the share price today, would it get you a small Starbucks in Paris here in Charles?
No, because the Starbucks in Paris is extortionate. It would not get you a Starbucks in Paris.
It's $2.77 the share price,
gosh.
which is down about 72.5%, about 72.5%.
Thereabouts.
0.47 on the opening price. So the market has spoken, to be honest. Let's see, it was not particularly well received by plenty of people who wanted to criticize it. But in terms of production, good quality, sponsors were there, but it was, there was no glitches.
Yeah. And people watched, people talked about it. My whole, online timelines were talking about it.
Oh, 100%. But will they watch it next year? That's my question. Let's see. And just a couple of any other business points before we leave you is, where are you off to tomorrow, which is today for anybody watching?
Yes, on Friday I am going to Roland Garros, going to the tennis. I am so excited. I'm a massive tennis fan and I've never been. So I'm thrilled. It's going to be, I made the mistake of, I had a choice between day session and night session, and I chose day because I was worried about getting home. But it's going to be so hot. It's going to be like 31, 32. So I'm going to have to find some shade. But I'm thrilled. I'm so excited. And obviously while we were in Paris, there's a lot of tennis stakeholders about. The WTA were here, the ATP, Tennis Australia. So a lot of conversation happening around tennis as well. I mean, it's good timing. So hopefully we'll have some more tennis intel at some point in the coming weeks, months, and hopefully more than that.
I'm intrigued to see how you feel it differs to Wimbledon. I always felt, I used to go, so Eurosport did some days there, and it's a really different vibe. Very much, you know, kind of, you swap your Wimbledon flowers and strawberries for, I'll tell you what they swap it for, and what you'll need in the sun is a Lacoste straw boater hat. Do you know how much one of those would set you back? Is it more or less than the share price of Enhanced Games?
I would say 100.
100 euros?
Yeah.
130 euros.
Okay, if you're paying for it, I'll buy one.
You can't expense it. But I actually wore, a little known fact, I used to wear an optional straw boater at one of my schools.
Yeah, you also had a briefcase though, didn't you?
Which is not... I did actually, for 2 years. Anyway, enough of that. Yeah, enjoy the tennis.
Thank you.
It should be good fun. Do you know who you're seeing?
I don't, because they haven't quite set the schedule yet. I know who's playing tomorrow, but they haven't set whose day and whose night. So I'll report back.
Excellent. Any other business is always very whimsical. I wanted to be slightly more serious this week in that Crystal Palace last Wednesday night won a European trophy, and Aston Villa did so just a week earlier, which for us here at Sport Business was kind of quite poignant. We lost Matt Cutler this year, we lost Kevin Roberts a few years ago, two figures who had a huge impact on this company. For their two teams to have won European trophies in the same season made a few people think about them naturally, and it's just such a lovely tribute. So sad that they're not here to see it, but a lovely, lovely tribute to two great guys who would have been so happy for each other and then so happy for their teams. So we'll maybe sign off by saying we're thinking about Kev, we're thinking about Matt, and their teams did them proud. I want to thank you, Maria, for joining me here. Thank you, Matthew, for chat earlier on. We will be back next week in maybe a slightly less leafy surrounding.
Slightly less hot, I hope also.
Slightly less hot. I will be in Glasgow actually, so guaranteed slightly less hot. Please check out the links in the notes for a bit more on some of the stories here, or check out the website at the start of next week where we'll have more. We'll have videos on socials, and as usual, for all the most accurate rights fees across media and sponsorship, go to sportbusiness.com to check out your options, and plenty of big news stories as well. Some big ones this week. We'll have more big ones next week, and we'll be back in a week's time or 6 days' time. Thanks, Maria.
Thanks.
See you later.